Hi, welcome to Epicenter Bitcoin, the show which talks about the technologies, projects, and startups driving decentralization and the global cryptocurrency revolution. My name is Sébastien Couture.
And I'm Meher Roy. Today we are joined by a pair of talented developers from Argentina. They have worked on many projects. Some of them are quite well known in the Bitcoin industry. These projects are Proof of Existence, Streamium, Faradam, and Decentraland. We are going to talk about their projects and the prospects of Bitcoin in Argentina. To introduce our guests, they are Manuel Arauz and Esteban Ordano. We are very happy to have you on the show, Manuel and Esteban.
Hey, Mer. Thanks for having us. We're glad to be here.
Hi. Thanks a lot for having us here.
Okay, so perhaps we could start with Bitcoin in Argentina, because there's this impression in the Bitcoin media that Argentina is the one country which could adopt Bitcoin and jumpstart Bitcoin and leapfrog ahead of all the other nations in this technology. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's actually pretty funny to us to read all those articles claiming Argentina is like the center for Bitcoin and where Bitcoin is growing faster than. It's actually not quite true. As I always tell everyone, Argentina is kind of a good spot in many ways for Bitcoin because our local currency is really, really bad and there are big capital controls and it's hard to get foreign currencies. But actually adoption is pretty slow, and I would say Bitcoin is growing much faster and adoption is much wider in other countries. So I wouldn't say Argentina is the best place for Bitcoin right now. It's actually, I read many things in news articles that are totally not true about Argentina and Bitcoin. So be careful about that.
But at the same time, the development scene in Argentina is quite good. There are many companies and cool projects that are springing from Argentina. So that kind of counterbalances the low usage of Bitcoin in general.
And I think one thing that has been pretty consistent is the Argentinian government's attempts to sort of stop Bitcoin from proliferating in Argentina, regardless of whether or not it's being used. How are those startups coping with that?
Yeah, actually, the Argentinian government is not actively working against Bitcoin. I wouldn't say that. There was the only official communication or action about Bitcoin was a posting by the central bank warning the population about Bitcoin not being minted by the government, like saying, okay, be careful with this because we don't regulate Bitcoin, we don't regulate its emission, so be careful. And that's about it, as far as I know. I'm not a legal expert, but it's actually a more or less friendly environment for Bitcoin companies in Argentina.
So we've been duped by all those CoinDesk articles telling us that Argentina is like...
Yeah, sure. So Streamium is a live streaming application that uses Bitcoin payment channels as a monetization option. So it started off as a hackathon project between 7 friends. It's actually, the team is quite big. It was a group that we used to get together during the weekends we call them Bitcoin dinners. We got together and talked about latest news about Bitcoin, what we saw about the future. And after a while, we got bored about just talking because most of us are developers or work with technology. So we wanted to actually do something. One of the guys suggested doing a hackathon. So we got together on a weekend and started. It was actually Esteban's idea to build Streamium. We were talking a lot about payment channels and we wanted to build an application that was interesting in the sense that it showed the real value of payment channels as a protocol. So we built it over a couple of weekends and we launched it several months later because it was a super slow development in our free time. But that's the story.
So what it basically does is it allows a user to record something and stream it live and in exchange receive payments through Bitcoin micro payment channels. So maybe we could discuss part of the architecture of Streamium. And there are two important sections to it. One is how does the money flow, and the second is how does the data flow. And could you explain how both of these things happen when I create my own Streamium stream?
Yes, of course. So Streamium uses WebRTC, which is a decentralized peer-to-peer protocol, so browsers can talk to each other. We are currently relying on a rendezvous server so that browsers can create the connections between each other. And with that WebRTC connection, you can send both data and the video. We're using the capability of sending data so they can negotiate a Bitcoin payment channel. And this is actually, I think it's the first implementation of a payment channel for some kind of like real world usage. Once that payment channel is established, the video streaming starts. And it's a broadcasting mechanism. So if I'm broadcasting my video, everybody that is receiving the video will have to be paying me through a payment channel.
So from a technical standpoint, it's not fully decentralized. We have, I will say the gotchas in a second, but both the video goes through a peer-to-peer protocol and the payments, because payments go through Bitcoin payment channels, which we'll know is a decentralized payment system, and the video goes through WebRTC, which is a peer-to-peer protocol for the browser. And the two points of centralization are what Esteban mentioned, the rendezvous server where peers can get the other peers' information for discovery, and of course the static HTML server that serves the files for the client to run the application.
Okay, so could you describe the payment channels and how they work in more detail?
So a payment channel is kind of like opening a tap in a bar. You set a certain amount of money that it's the maximum that you want to spend in that payment channel, and you lock those funds in a 2 of 2 address. So this 2 of 2 is controlled by both parties in the payment channel. So any transaction that gets signed will have to have the approval of both parties. And there's a time lock mechanism in case I funded this payment channel, but the other party that is going to be receiving the funds will not be willing to sign a transaction giving back all the funds. So after a day, you can recover all your Bitcoins. Is that clear enough? Or?
Yeah, but so if I understand those, in this case, what you're doing is you're doing a 2 of 2 multi-signature transaction. The person that's doing the streaming will have incentive to sign that, but so for the viewer,
so the viewer is
forces him to sign?
The viewer is the one that will fund the channel. We usually call them technically the consumer and the provider of the service. So the consumer funds the channel and asks the provider for a signed transaction that becomes valid the next day, so he can have the funds back if the protocol gets interrupted.
Okay, so once the stream is initiated, the consumer has already signed his part of the transaction and is waiting for the provider to sign his part of the transaction.
Yes, he actually does this. He signs a transaction and he waits for the provider to sign a second transaction, spending that first 2 of 2 paying to a two address transaction. It's kind of like complicated. I would need a blackboard to explain it. Sorry.
Well, that's okay because this is a podcast, so people don't necessarily see. If they're not watching the video, they're not going to see it anyway. But and so the payment channel is opened, and then so there's a payment for every chunk of, let's say, 30 seconds of video. How does that work? How does the money keep flowing?
All right. So as sending an update of the payment channel, which means spending a little bit more money from those locked funds. When I send one of these small micropayments to the provider of the service, he will send me back the video. Right now in Streamium, what we are using is we interrupt the video if the payment flow stops coming, and if the video stops coming, we interrupt the payment flow. So it's a trustless solution for payments.
So basically, could we say it like this? Suppose it's me, the creator of the video, and Esteban is the consumer. I'm the producer, and Esteban is the consumer. Then what is happening is when I start my stream, nothing happens. Now, when you want to see my stream, then you will send your bitcoins into a multi-signature address that is controlled by you and me jointly, right?
Yes.
And so now, so basically, when the service started, you agreed to watch the service for a maximum of 1 hour, and then let's say the price of that 1 hour is $50 an hour. So you locked $50 worth of Bitcoin into an address which is jointly controlled by you and me. Now what starts to happen is there has to be data that needs to go from my webcam, because I'm the producer, to your terminal. So with each item of data, let's say like there's a big packet that has 30 seconds of video. So corresponding to the transfer of that item, that packet of data from my computer to yours, you need to send me a transaction which allows me to claim part of the funds that were locked into the multi-signature account, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And
okay.
It doesn't have to be 30 seconds. It can be 1 second. It could be 1 minute, and you may want to be sure that you have a certain margin of error, so you don't stop the video because you didn't receive the payment. So it's actually more like a flow of video from one way, and a flow of payments in the other way.
Okay, so the question I start to have here is, let's say I am creating a stream, and I have already created this multi-signature account with Esteban because Esteban is watching my stream. Now Manuel wants to see my stream, so I create another account with Manuel, and then Sebastian wants to join. There's a third one created. Is it the case that I'm broadcasting my video data to all three of you through WebRTC? Wouldn't that need a lot of bandwidth on my side?
Yes, you are constrained by the amount of bandwidth that your upstream connection has. So if you want to have many users, let's say, I guess that more than 10 will start to really stress the connection. You may want to look into a different solution, some kind of like first cast to a server that will then broadcast the video to a lot of users, or maybe use a more decentralized solution like BitTorrent for the distribution of the video, right?
Let's take a short break to talk about our brand new sponsors, Hide.me. I've personally been using them for about a year, so I'm really excited to have them on. You know, we sometimes take our privacy and security online for granted. I know that I did. I often tell people, if you use public Wi-Fi, you might as well assume that your data has been compromised in some way. There's so many ways people can attack you nowadays. I mean, if you're using a website that isn't SSL, people can, on the same network as you, can pretty much see anything that you're doing on that website. And even SSL websites, like your bank, social media, or Bitcoin wallets, for example, can be vulnerable to certain types of attacks. So, as a Bitcoin user, in your office or in a co-working space, or like if you're in a public Wi-Fi, someone could potentially target you just based specifically on the websites that you visit. Now you want to protect yourself against that. And to do that, you need Hide.me. Hide.me gives you an encrypted connection between your device and their network of servers, so attackers and even your ISP have no idea what you're doing. This all happens over super fast gigabit Ethernet, so there's no lags, and you have an encrypted tunnel there, which protects you. And in addition to that, Hide.me keeps no logs of any of your activity.
And the great thing about Hide.me is that they have a free plan. The free plan gives you up to 2 gigabytes of data per month at unthrottled bandwidth, and that's just enough so you can protect yourself whenever you use a cafe, when you're traveling, you're on an airplane, in an airport, or use any public Wi-Fi spot. And you can sign up and get that free account when you go to hide.me/epicenter. The great thing too is that if you ever decide later to get a premium account, then signing up with that URL is going to get you 35% off. The premium account includes unlimited bandwidth, access to all their servers worldwide, and they've got lots of them. And it also lets you connect up to 5 devices simultaneously. You can use it on your mobile phone and with all your devices. And of course, you can pay with Bitcoin. Now we'd like to welcome Hide.me as a new sponsor. We're excited about what they're doing, and of course we would like to thank them for their support of Epicenter Bitcoin.
So I guess this is sort of a structural problem with WebRTC, is that it's a peer-to-peer only protocol. Now you mentioned BitTorrent. That's interesting because we have thought about different ways that you could scale WebRTC, and I guess this would not only apply to what you're doing in sort of the Bitcoin micropayments space, but also could be potentially used for large scale WebRTC broadcasts by just about anyone, is by using BitTorrent or perhaps IPFS or some other distributed file sharing protocol to stream video. Does that already exist? Has that been done before, or is this something that you're looking into for Streamium?
Well, actually, one of the other Streamium developers, his name is Shemel, he did a small experiment about that. We had the same idea, and he wanted to test it out. And it actually worked pretty well, but, well, not pretty well. It could work, but it was hard to make it perform well, talking about live video quality. So there are some complications where you're dealing with a live stream of video, and we were having because torrents are predetermined size files, because you need to check the file integrity, and it's not designed to stream files. So you have some problems when you are connecting several chunks of video, and it's also as Esteban pointed out, in live streaming you can drop some frames and it's fine, but the BitTorrent protocol doesn't support that kind of stuff. You need to download the whole file. So we had some pretty successful experiments with that, but there's still a lot of work to be done to optimize the protocol and allow other ways to distribute the video without relying on the provider to share the same video to everyone.
And is this something that has been addressed? The problem of streaming live video to a large audience without having to rely on some centralized third party like Ustream or something like that. Is this something that has been addressed, or perhaps we have actual solutions for sort of outside of what you guys are doing?
Not that I'm aware of, but it will be interesting to see if there's a distributed peer-to-peer version of the real-time protocol, which is what WebRTC and Skype or all those solutions use. It's either RTP or XH263 or 363 or something. I don't remember the name. It would be a really cool experiment to build something on that.
Well, I mean, if you guys successfully do this with BitTorrent, you essentially be the first to achieve that, right?
Yeah, we actually don't know if there's another project doing something similar. We should look it out. But as I told you, it worked like as a proof of concept, but it still needs a lot of work to actually work correctly. We would need to polish the protocol in many ways, and I don't think the best solution is to use BitTorrent based on the things I mentioned earlier. But maybe building a specific protocol for this could work.
Another question is, doesn't the fact that Bitcoin need confirmations to confirm a Bitcoin transaction, one needs 1 hour, and zero confirmation transactions are not secure, doesn't it impede Streamium in any way? Like, for example, if me and Esteban want to launch this stream, then Esteban's money needs to be locked in this 2 of 2 multi-signature account, and the process of that locking to be secure needs 1 hour. So how does it work out?
What if I try to double spend you? So right now, Streamium uses 0 confirmations by block cipher, and we are using the confidence in transaction parameter from them, because the threat model is quite low on restrictions. If like the worst thing that could happen for you is that I can watch a few seconds of video from you, because the Streamium right now, when it detects a double spend, it will cut the channel off. So you could be stolen of a few seconds of content from me, but that's kind of like the worst that could happen.
Okay.
Streamium on your side will take care of that, and if the transaction gets confirmed, then it will stop checking for double spends or stuff like that.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that when I'm trying to create this stream, there is a risk of double spends, but the value at risk is very low. So,
right.
For example, if I'm charging $10 an hour for a stream, and you do a double spend, maybe it's the case that you saw $2.5 worth of video, and I didn't get paid for it.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you manage to successfully double spend.
And probably even less, because right now block cipher, the moment it detects in any transaction anywhere, it will report that, and Streamium on your side will say, no, hey, this guy is trying to make a double spend, so let's stop the video right now.
Today's magic word is stream.
So what is the monetization model for a service such as Streamium? Are you looking to monetize it in any way?
Yeah, so Streamium is an open source and free project. Anyone can use it for free. There's no charge. I mean, the streamer charges their audience, but to use the product is completely free. There's no fees. We're not planning to monetize it in any way. We had some ideas of doing a separate service that allows streamers to increase their potential audience based on the scalability problems we already discussed, given that it's completely peer-to-peer and the limit is based on the streamer's bandwidth. We are thinking about building a service that broadcasters could connect to for a fee. It could distribute the video for them. So still using WebRTC, but with an intermediary for video distribution. But we haven't completed that. I mean, we haven't moved forward with that. It's an idea. It's there in case we want to pursue monetization of Streamium.
So then the content producers get 100% of the money that they charge for the video.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's really cool. So, I mean, so we had another question regarding piracy. What prevents someone from rebroadcasting a stream that they're paying for free or for cheaper than what they're paying for it?
Basically, nothing. I think information wants to be free. The moment that you gave out information, the people that received it is free to rebroadcast it. I think that what weighs in favor of the content producer is that probably the quality of the rebroadcast will be lesser because of the video streaming. It kind of like loses some quality.
It's important to note that we're not trying to solve piracy with Streamium. It's just a way to monetize live content you create for free. But of course, once the viewer gets the video on their machines, they can rebroadcast it in any way they want. They already have
like any content, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then, I mean, my next question is on use cases. So, there's so many ways to do streaming video these days. We're using Google Hangouts right now. Of course, that doesn't provide monetization, but some other solutions do. I believe YouTube is now starting to do monetization in their streams, and there's other services that allow that. What differentiates a Streamium user from YouTube paid live streams? I don't know what they call it, but from centralized services. What types of people do you see using Streamium as opposed to other types of streaming services?
It's kind of funny, but we have like 50% of our users are basically porn. So it's cam girls doing shows online for their clients, I guess. The other big use cases are education and live gaming. So it's people doing online classes or showing their screens while they play video games. But the biggest one by far is porn. We think that it's probably based on the advantages you have with Bitcoin, where you don't have the so-called. We learned about this after launching Streamium. It's something we didn't know about, but in live porn, like live camera porn, there's the problem of what they call the wife chargeback, where they have a really high rate of chargeback, and it's not based on the actual user, but when the wife sees, oh, what is this? And he says, no, I don't know, I didn't use that. Okay, let's do a chargeback. And that's a big problem, apparently. And this sort of solves that, but it also allows the user to sort of end the stream at any point in time, so you don't have to prepay for something you want to watch. And it's sort of a win-win in both sides. That's our analysis of why this is interesting for the porn use case. But
so there's the privacy and anonymity part on the client side, and I suppose on the provider side is more money in the girl's pockets and not having to subject to the rules and restrictions of some campsite. Essentially the people using it are completely independent.
Yeah, and apparently the fees those sites charge for the girls or the video producers is really, really high. Like I don't remember exactly the numbers, but I heard something like 40 or 50%. So it's mad.
So on the other types of people using it, you mentioned education and online gaming. Are you talking about sort of Twitch style people streaming their online gaming?
Exactly. So in education, we have several language classes, like English or Spanish teachers, and a small amount of users doing consulting. And on the gaming side, it's mainly just people playing video games and streaming their screens while they play. That's a feature we added some weeks after we launched Streamium, the possibility to broadcast your own screen, because some users requested that, so we added.
So, I mean, obviously, like with everything Bitcoin, all the technologies are in this super early phase, and somehow it also resembles the Internet of old, in which pornography was the first killer application. So maybe it's fitting that even for Bitcoin, this should be one of the first. I had this imagination that maybe one day drones could stream. Like I have this like $400 Parrot Bipop drone that you can fly around, and even though it's moving in the air, the video quality is extremely still. Like it seems like it's a tripod flying in the air. And I had this imagination that perhaps in the future I'll go to a concert from Pantera or some band or Bono, and there'll be drones flying around, and I can actually check out, and they'll be using something like Streamium to send out their video, and I can actually take any of this stream and see what the drone is seeing, basically. So, I mean, like I had the feeling that it's an idea that has a lot of users in the future, and maybe it needs just Bitcoin to catch on in order to be really widespread. It was interesting also to see, like you mentioned that you have this service that just does micropayments. Could you tell us what that is?
Yes, based on what we talked with our early users, mainly on the education side, most were requesting some features we were not ready to develop, like, okay, we need a digital whiteboard where we can sort of write stuff and the student can watch that, or we need a dual video communication so that the viewer can also send their webcam content. And we said, okay, do we want to really build an education product? But because based on what we talked with them, what they really valued was the fact that they could charge by the second they were doing the class, because sometimes they have problems charging after the class ends. So you do a 2-hour class and then the student disappears and they never pay, and so it's hard to get the money. The money is a problem in online teaching. So when do you charge? Before the class, after the class? So they solved this, and we thought that maybe extracting the payment system from Streamium and doing a super simple app where you can use payment channels inside of any other application could be interesting. So we did that. We built Faradam. It's just a good way to describe it is Streamium without the video. So you create a session. It's like a timer where you create a timer, you set your hourly rate or your rate per minute, and then you can connect a client and charge them by the second. And you can use it combined with any other application like Skype or whatever. It could actually be a chat session or whatever you want, and charge for your time to your clients.
So which gets the higher number of users? Is it Streamium or is it Faradam? So as I understand it, it's Streamium is Faradam plus the software to do live video streaming. So which one is proving more popular?
Yeah, actually Faradam was a pretty unsuccessful experiment. We had really few users. It was basically the users that requested that functionality that used it a couple of times, but then we didn't see any actual growth, even though we tried to make it grow in some ways. So it's definitely Streamium is way more popular, and we have more users there.
I mean, it seems kind of obvious, since Streamium is sort of more of a final product, where Faradam, I mean, you sort of have to make it. You have to come up with the means to provide the service which you're charging for. So, and of course you have all that porn on Streamium, and we all know that brings in a bunch of people, right? I wanted to talk about alternative funding models. I mean, micropayments have sort of been touted by the Bitcoin community as one of the killer apps, and Bitcoin has often been described in some sense as a way to solve the content monetization problem that we have. I mean, we've definitely it's been something that we've thought a lot about. How do we monetize our content? I think a lot of content producers also ask themselves that question. There's different ways to monetize your content. You can sell advertising, as we do. You can have a paywall. You can charge by the article, which is mostly like pay-per-view. And for the most part, advertising has won pretty much for every type of content that you don't literally pay for with money. Now, with regards to Bitcoin and microtransactions and how you would pay for content, I mean, it seems promising. It seems interesting as a thought experiment that you would go on some website and you would come up to an article and it would tell you, okay, you want to pay for this, and you just say yes, or a YouTube video, or perhaps a stream. But in reality, I'm not sure that people are ready to do that. For one, you need to have people using Bitcoin in this particular example, and two, people are so used to not paying for content directly that in order for that behavior to change, you would need a whole lot of sort of pressure, I guess, from the content industry. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on this. Where do you see micropayments going in the future?
I have some thoughts, but I think I'm talking too much. I want to know if Esteban has some comments there first.
Well, one of the biggest issues that we've seen with user-facing micropayments is the mental cost of those transactions. You don't want to be browsing around and at the end of the day, knowing that you lost $10, $20 in some random website. But at the same time, you don't want to be agreeing to be paying 1 cent per each article that you're reading. So it's kind of like an unsolved problem from a usability point of view. But at the same time, it's probably going to be most used in machine-to-machine, this aspect of micropayments. Although right now the best solution that we've seen for content monetization is this one of recording every website that you've been to, and at the end of the day, pay out accordingly to each one website that you've seen, based on how much time you spend on it, or how much you like it or which ones you liked the most.
As a donation, essentially.
Yeah, something like that. With right now, I think it's the best kind of like solution. I don't know what Manuel. That's one of the things that we were discussing with Manuel.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really hard problem. Like, there's many companies and many smart people working on this, because we all have the intuition that there's some way of using Bitcoin micropayments to sort of change the way content is monetized on the web or in general online. But it's a really hard problem. We need to work on the really small details of the user experience. There's a really great article by Nick Szabo talking about the mental transaction costs of micropayments and how smart contracts can help with that. I recommend reading that if you're interested in the topic. But it's actually it will be a really long work of trying to figure out what the user interface is. In the case of human level micropayments for content, I agree with Esteban that we'll probably see other applications where there are no humans involved, and their micropayments make much more sense, because essentially what micropayments and smart contracts solve is the problem of trust between the parties. They reduce the trust between the two parties for an economic interaction, And in the case of computers, in the case of humans, the trust is usually there. So it's really in the details where you can improve the experience with micropayments. But when you have two machines interacting, it's really, machines cannot trust other machines because they can break, or they have, I don't know, the concept of trust is really human. And it makes a lot of sense to try and build some applications of micropayments with machine-to-machine interaction.
There's one interesting example of an attempt to try to solve the content monetization problem, or to at least reduce the number of ads that we see, is perhaps you've seen a Google contributor. So basically what Google has done is said to their users, to everyone who uses the internet and sees Google advertising. So whenever you go on a website, for instance, and you see an ad, there's a pretty good chance that that ad was sold through Google, and the content producer is making money when you see that ad and when you click it. And what Google has done is they said, okay, we're going to put up this platform called Google Contributor, and as a user of the internet, you can pay upfront, say $2, $5, $10, $20 per month, to not see ads. And rather than paying the content producers through the display of ads, you're going to pay the content producer directly through Google Contributor, and we will give them the money basically as though you were seeing an ad. Instead, you'll just see a white box, or you can put custom HTML in there or whatever. So I thought that was really an interesting experiment, but Google is in a particularly good position to do that because they own the advertising space.
That's part of the problem with these kinds of solutions too. It's hard to solve the distribution of a micropayment solution for content monetization, because when you don't have any sites that support this, you have no reason for users to have the client side of the application. And if you have no users that can pay for these micro interactions, the sites don't have any reason to implement the system too. So it's also a business or sort of growth hacking problem, where someone needs to figure out a way to make this grow in some way, to solve the chicken and egg problem, so to speak.
It's time for a word from our sponsors, Vaultoro.com, the gold to Bitcoin exchange. Look, if you've ever traded gold with fiat, you know how much of a hassle that can be. Of course, trading gold with Bitcoin makes it super easy and super fast to send money into the exchange. And with Vaultoro, you can start trading gold as little as 1 milligram, and their trading fees start at 0.2%. And with the world-leading security and transparency that Vaultoro are providing, you can rest assured that your Bitcoins are safe. And by the way, because you're trading commodities, you don't need to provide any KYC documentations for deposits less than $5,000 worth of Bitcoins per day, which means that there are no barriers to entry. You can get started today.
You might be asking yourself, what do those guys do all day? Do they lie in their bathtub swimming gold? Well, you might think that, but actually they may be doing that part of the time, but the other part of the time they keep doing the same thing over and over again, and that's improving Vaultoro. And they've done it again. So this time they've added instant confirmations. They've partnered with BlockCipher, and you can now deposit your Bitcoins and start trading straight away. So keep improving the service. So go to Vaultoro.com and start trading gold today. We would like to thank Vaultoro for their support of Epicenter Bitcoin.
So you've mentioned that the mental cost of transactions is a barrier to micropayments. And on this front, I think Streamium has innovated quite a bit. Like all the user sees is how much somebody charges per hour, and then the system works, and you just decide whether you want to give something $50 an hour, and then you watch the stream and you close out, and everything else is handled on its own. The user doesn't really see the meter running, for example. What kind of user feedback have you received regarding this aspect? Are users happy with this kind of system, or do you think something else is needed, something even better is needed?
Well, right now the highest barrier for using payment channels is the knowledge of that you are sending this transaction with for the maximum amount of time that you will be watching. And that kind of like confuses the users because, well, I've already tried to explain the payment channel, but it's a complicated thing to do. With the Streamium, we're having that maximum amount of money to be locked in thing, which is the current biggest problem for payment channels for users.
Because the fact that the users need to lock funds and there are currently no wallets supporting payment channels natively, we need to ask them to make a sort of deposit. Then we create the payment channel, and even though it's trustless, we require the user to send the actual total amount, so it feels like, okay, am I prepaying this or not? So a big barrier to that is actual wallet adoption of the payment channels protocol. That will decrease the mental costs a lot, I think. But with regards to the metered payment, we actually asked this question because we were afraid of the same thing about users being, I don't know, nervous about the costs, not knowing how much they're actually paying. But from what we interviewed, all of them said that it was okay. Like they understood it and they were not nervous. They were not checking the time to see if they were wasting a lot of money or not. It was, I think we did a pretty good job, but we're still really far from an optimal solution, I think.
Yeah, I used your service, and in the beginning, I saw this multi-signature address, and the first thing I thought was it's a centralized service that I'm sending money to you, and you will partition the money between me and the stream creator. But then that turned out to be wrong.
It's actually a wallet in a browser that we had to code so we can have the payment channel.
Español, English, Deutsch. Normalmente produzco solo videos en inglés y español. Normally I produce only videos in English and Spanish. Normalerweise produziere ich nur Videos en English und Spanish. Pero hoy voy a hacer otra excepción y traducirlo también en alemán. But today I make another exception and translate it into German too. Aber heute werde ich nochmal eine Ausnahme machen und es auch in Deutsch übersetzen. Ya algunas semanas tengo escrito en mi lista de tareas por hacer de traducir el video #BTC4. Now already some weeks ago I have written on my to-do list to translate the video BTC4, #BTC4. Schon seit ein paar Wochen habe ich auf meiner To-Do-Liste geschrieben, den Video BTC4 in Deutsch zu übersetzen. Estoy segura que esta idea puede ayudar a mucha gente económicamente. I'm sure that this can help many people economically. Ich bin sicher, dass diese Idee vielen Leuten finanziell helfen kann. Y da motivación para aprender Bitcoin. And give motivation to learn about Bitcoin. Und Motivation geben, um über Bitcoin zu lernen. En este momento el precio de Bitcoin es muy bajo, económico. At the moment the price of Bitcoin is very low, economic. Im Moment ist der Preis von Bitcoin sehr tief. Sería el momento ideal para invertir. Hoy es el 15 de abril 2015. Would be the ideal moment to invest. Today is April 15th, 2015. Es wäre der ideale Moment zu investieren. Heute ist der 15. April 2015. El 27 de marzo 2015 he publicado en mi canal de YouTube Vanos Enigma el primer vídeo sobre hashtag BTC4 explicando cómo me vino esta idea. On March 27th of 2015, I published the first video about hashtag BTC4 in my channel YouTube Vanos Enigma, explaining how I got the idea. Am 27. März 2015 habe ich in meinem YouTube-Channel Vanos Enigma den ersten Video über Hashtag BTC4 veröffentlicht und erklärt, wie ich diese Idee bekommen habe. La idea consiste principalmente en lo siguiente. The idea mainly consists in the following. Die Idee besteht hauptsächlich in folgendem. Imprimir direcciones de Bitcoin en papel, 10 o mínimo 10 o mejor 100. To print Bitcoin directions in paper, at least 10 or better 100. Bitcoin-Adressen in Papier ausdrucken, mínimo 10 oder besser gleich 100. Y luego poner en cada dirección de Bitcoin una pequeña cantidad de Bitcoin. And then put in every Bitcoin direction a little amount of Bitcoin. Und dann in jede Bitcoin-Adresse eine kleine Summe von Bitcoin transferieren. Y la próxima vez, cuando otra vez ves una persona por la calle pidiendo dinero, and the next time you see again a person begging for money on the street, und das nächste Mal, wenn du wieder eine Person auf der Straße betteln siehst, y para tus amigos y amigas, and for your friends of course, und für deine Freunde natürlich, o tal vez de propina en un restaurante, or maybe a tip in a restaurant, oder Trinkgeld im Restaurant. Bueno, a la hora de imprimir también copiar y guardar las llaves privadas de Bitcoin, de direcciones de Bitcoin. When you print the Bitcoin addresses, copy and save the private keys of the Bitcoin addresses, of course. Wenn man die Bitcoin-Adressen druckt, auch die auch die privaten Schlüssel, Bitcoin-Address-Schlüsseln kopieren und speichern. Y a la hora de distribuir las direcciones de Bitcoin, escribir la fecha, por ejemplo, hoy es el 15 de abril 2015, escribir la fecha más plus 4 años, igual 15 de abril 2019. And then in the moment when you distribute the Bitcoin addresses, you write the date, for example, today, April 15th, 2015, plus 4 years is April 15th, 2019. Und dann in dem Moment, wenn man die Bitcoin-Adressen verteilt, auf das Papier schreiben, das heutige Datum, zum Beispiel 15. April 2015, plus 4 Jahre ist gleich 15.04.2019. Luego vas a explicar a la gente, mira, esta es la llave privada, tú y yo la tienes. Si no quitas, transfieres este dinero de Bitcoin en estos 4 años, yo lo vuelvo a tener o sacar. Then you explain to the people, look, this is the private key. I have it and you have it. If you don't take this money, Bitcoin, out of this account, I will take it out in these 4 years, at the end of these 4 years. Und dann erklärst du den Leuten, schau, das ist der private Schlüssel. Ich und du haben diesen privaten Schlüssel, Bitcoin-Schlüssel. Wenn du bis Ende dieser 4 Jahre das Geld Bitcoin nicht raustust, Transfer, dann hole ich es zurück. De esta forma das más motivación a la gente para empezar a aprender cómo funciona Bitcoin. This way you give more motivation to the people to learn how the technology of Bitcoin functions. Auf diese Weise gibst du mehr Motivation den Leuten zu lernen, wie die Technologie von Bitcoin funktioniert. En mi video antiguo.
So basically, when I put in money, I am actually creating a new set of private keys, and with those new private keys, I'm putting money into this signature address. So it's my own browser that is my own wallet in the background without me even realizing it, right?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
So maybe we could talk about one of your other projects that is quite interesting. It's called Decentraland. And it's a project that I saw that merges virtual reality and blockchain technology. Now I've been surfing around the virtual reality world for the past half a year, and you see many people talk about the intersection of the blockchain and the virtual reality. There's statements like Bitcoin will be the currency of the metaverse. The metaverse is the virtual reality universe, or you see statements like that the virtual reality needs to be decentralized. So could you explain what is the connection between these two technologies and why you chose to devote some of your time to it?
It's actually a super experimental project we did for fun. So don't expect a lot of sense to come out of this, but we were also really excited personally about virtual reality and of course blockchain technology because we work there in the industry. And we wanted to do a small experiment where we could combine those two cool ideas. I don't know how much sense that makes, but we wanted to build a blockchain-based virtual reality world. The idea is to use the blockchain as the support for the structure of the world. So in Bitcoin, you have the blockchain as a data structure that allows you to synchronize the state of the decentralized network so that all the nodes can agree and reach a consensus on what to simplify it, the balance of every Bitcoin address is. So the same idea could be applied to a network where the nodes synchronize the state of a virtual world. So transactions in this blockchain would be state modifications of the world. So and in the case of Decentraland, we did a really simple technical prototype where you have the model of the virtual world is just a pixel grid. So a two-dimensional color grid where each pixel can have different colors. And transactions represent a color change in the two-dimensional grid. So one transaction in Decentraland is a message that changes the color of one pixel at an XY coordinate. And mining is used as in Bitcoin to validate and provide security to the transactions. And when you generate a new block, the Coinbase transaction in Decentraland allows you to add a new pixel to the grid. So initially, you have a one-by-one grid, so only one pixel. And when you mine the next block, you can add a new pixel to the grid in an adjacent position. So the idea is that the grid of pixels will grow over time when users are mining new blocks. And then where the owners of each pixel can change the color. So it's actually a really simple model of a virtual world. It's sort of a proof of concept that has no actual use, but it was a fun experiment to do.
So it was like, I could see that it's a prototype, but it could, to my eye, it also, it was sort of the answer to one of the problems that virtual reality has. Well, not an exact answer, but a really interesting one. So with virtual reality, I think the problem is, if I actually start to live my life in virtual reality, then I want to have my own house or my own property in virtual reality, and I want to own something in virtual reality, like the way people used to own stuff in Second Life. But the problem is if all of the information to create this virtual space is with a company like Google, and I call something my house in virtual reality, but actually all the information to build it is owned by Google, that can go down any day, that can prevent me from accessing my own house in virtual reality. So a centralized model is like, I want to own something, but I really can't own anything in a centralized model of data processing. So it seemed to be that with Decentraland, I could have my ownership over something, and the data structure that is giving me ownership is not a centralized entity, and that makes it really interesting. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's exactly what we try to do with Decentraland. This first version, you could see those pixels as parcels of the world, and you own those parcels, and you get to decide which color you can paint those pixels. But in a further version, that would be your land, your house, instead of a pixel and the color.
Also, the motivation for that, like why would you want it to be decentralized and actually own it? We even today, where we have virtual worlds that are super centralized, say, I don't know, games like World of Warcraft, players spend a lot of time and invest a lot of money and time into those virtual worlds. We think that when you actually own the stuff and you don't have the risk of a company changing the rules of the world or taking ownership of what you built, the time and the things we will see created in those virtual worlds will increase a lot. Like the investment of users into virtual worlds will grow a lot because they will actually know that there is no risk to lose that to the whims of a company.
Before we wrap up here, I'd like to briefly talk about proof of existence. So, Manuel, you sort of pioneered this, the idea of proof of existence. And it's funny because I was reading just randomly reading this white paper this week, and it mentioned you in the abstract as the person who had pioneered the sort of idea of the proof of existence in the blockchain. So, proof of existence essentially is time-stamping a piece of data with a hash that you then put into a transaction and in the op return, and that hash is sort of notarized into the blockchain forever, so that you can prove that at time X this piece of data existed. So it could be a document, it could be an MP3 file, it could be a contract, whatever. And that allows you to notarize a piece of information at a certain point in time. I personally find that this is one of the most interesting use cases for Bitcoin and blockchain technology outside of payments. And I wanted to get your ideas about what you think about that, and where do you think this is going?
Yeah. First of all, I have to say that I was not the first to think about this. After building proof of existence, I found that there are several projects doing the same thing, the same idea. Although proof of existence was certainly the first user-friendly experience, most were tools for developers where you had to download some command line utility to do this and running a full node. So it was actually the first user-accessible way of doing it. But yeah, it is considered by many like the first real world application of the blockchain that is non-financial. And I think it's a really interesting way to think about the blockchain. Like there are a lot of things there are a lot of properties of Bitcoin that can be used for other systems other than payment. And mainly what proof of existence does is using the fact that it's a public ledger where you have decentralized consensus on data that is published, and that the blockchain structure allows to timestamp that data. This project was launched 3 years ago or so, and since then there have been many similar projects coming out. Some trying to improve on the technical side. Some trying to sort of build a nicer product, more targeted to a specific use case. Recently, there have been a couple of really interesting developments. The Ethereum project sort of improved both in the technical and the business side. They are building a system where it's based on an open source project called Chainpoint, where what you do is instead of inserting each document's hash in a single Bitcoin transaction, they use a Merkle tree to insert several documents. So you only insert one hash per each Bitcoin block, which is it's a better way to do it because with Bitcoin you only have one timestamp for each block, so it makes no sense to add many documents into the same Bitcoin block. But they solved it in a really interesting way where they can provide you a proof, like a proof where you don't need any of the other documents in the same block to know that your document actually is in that Bitcoin block. So the basic idea is you have a set of documents each 10 minutes, and you build a Merkle tree from that, and you insert the root of the tree into a Bitcoin block. And then you give each user a Merkle proof or the path in the Merkle tree that proves that your document is part of that Merkle tree. So the user can then use his document and the Merkle proof, or how they call it, I think it's a blockchain receipt or something like that. With those two pieces of information, you can prove that your document had a certain timestamp using the Bitcoin blockchain. That's an interesting project. Yeah, I'm very interested to see where this goes.
Are you aware of any instances where a notarization in the blockchain was? Well, I mean, my question is basically: is there legal precedence for this to stand up in court or in some sort of a dispute resolution? In, for instance, copyright, because there's other companies like we've talked to. Trent McConaughey of Ascribe, they're doing sort of notarization of digital art on the blockchain. And like you mentioned, there's so many other projects that are doing similar things. I feel like this might be something that sort of gains somewhat interesting quantities of adoption. How do you think that it would be legally? Will it become legally binding soon, do you think? Do you think that it would be adopted as something that people would sort of trust as a viable way to notarize documents rather than going through like a notary or what other copyright registration, things like that?
Yeah, so there's no legal precedent yet. The only similar case we have is the Canada Senate, that when they did a cryptocurrency research, they actually used a similar, well, actually the same protocol from proof of existence to certify their own cryptocurrency report in the blockchain. That's the only government acknowledgement of this technology working, but we still haven't seen any legal precedent of someone using it in court. I think that the way this could develop is someone that used proof of existence or a similar blockchain-based timestamping system going to court about something, and they will need to have an expert witness. Like I don't know how these are called in English, but the people that go to court and try to explain to the judge.
An expert witness. Yeah.
Okay, expert witness. And in that case, we'll see what precedent is set and if it can actually hold in court or not. But I think that as it works technically, it only needs time so that people sort of understand it and see the value, and sort of these kind of things need time. So it's a matter of, and as you said, with all these companies emerging and doing work in this area, I think it's better even. But we still need to see what happens in court.
The technology is solid though, and when we asked some lawyers in Argentina, they said that this could pretty easily hold an investigation, and it could actually be held correctly against a judge, which actually surprises me, because I thought that there would be no chance that a judge would take something like this into his trials.
Yeah, maybe we need a big case where it's like $100 million on stake and the proof is on the Bitcoin blockchain, and then the judges agree on it, and then that really drives this kind of thing mainstream. It's pretty similar to what happened in biology. Like, people were shouting that, can we patent life for 20 years? And then there's one guy who actually did patent it, and then there was a huge case for $50 million. And after that, suddenly this idea of patenting genes went into the mainstream. Maybe Bitcoin will be similar. It needs this big lawsuit moment where some big parties are suing each other, and the only proof is the Bitcoin blockchain.
What I find really interesting about the sort of service like proof of existence or some other services out there is that I find that it opens up the business model. The business model is not necessarily reliant on Bitcoin payments. So a service like proof of existence or the others that you mentioned, Tyrion, and services like this can charge per notarization with a credit card or whatever. So it allows people from outside of the Bitcoin and blockchain space to use the blockchain for something actually pretty useful, which is notarizing documents.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that that's a really big strength for a Bitcoin business right now, or a blockchain-based business, because user adoption is growing pretty slow. So if you are basing your product on the assumption that your users will have Bitcoin, you need a really compelling use case so that you get users to actually buy Bitcoin to use your application. In other case, you need to have an application where Bitcoin is invisible, and you, as you said, you can have credit card or PayPal payments and still use the blockchain in some other way where it's invisible to the user.
So before we wrap up, we just wanted to mention briefly, so you guys have a new company. Can you just tell us briefly about the company and what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, we just started a new company. It's called Smart Contract Solutions. We're doing work with smart contracts. We're currently in stealth mode, so we cannot talk about the details, but hopefully we'll have something we can talk publicly about soon.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you both for coming on today. It was a really interesting discussion. I think that, this the issue of content monetization is one that, there's definitely, Bitcoin definitely tries to solve it in some way. Now, whether or not it will it'll catch on because of user adoption of Bitcoin, or as we mentioned, the user experience problem that needs to be solved still remains to be seen. But in any case, I think that it does provide a really interesting way for content providers to monetize their content.
Yeah, definitely. We are also very eager to see solutions in that space. Content monetization, Streamium, Faradam, proof of existence, there is something from that into all this.
Okay, well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for joining us. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us today on another episode of Epicenter Bitcoin. We release new episodes every Monday. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. It could be also on iOS or Android. And you can also watch the video version of the show on YouTube at youtube.com/epicenterbitcoin. Of course, you can always send us a tip, and the tipping address will be in the show notes. Now, just as a quick note, regarding the t-shirt bribing operation that we had going on for these last few weeks, we've actually run out of t-shirts. So you can still leave us a review on iTunes, and you can send us an email at show@epicenterbitcoin.com to let us know that you've sent us a review. Unfortunately, we won't be able to send you the t-shirt right away. We're getting some new ones made as quickly as we can, and as soon as we have some new ones, we'll be shipping those out to our listeners. And for those of you who have received a t-shirt, we would be super grateful if you could take a picture of yourself with the t-shirt and send it to us, and we'd like to post that on social media. So thanks so much, and we look forward to being back next week. Will have incentive to sign that, but so for the viewer,
so the viewer is
forces him to sign.
The viewer is the one that will fund the channel. We usually call them technically the consumer and the provider of the service. So the consumer funds the channel and asks the provider for a signed transaction that becomes valid the next day, so he can have the funds back if the protocol gets interrupted.
Okay, so once the stream is initiated, the consumer has already signed his part of the transaction and is waiting for the provider to sign his part of the transaction.
Yes, he actually does this. He signs a transaction and he waits for the provider to sign a second transaction, spending that first 2 of 2, paying to a 2 of 2 address transaction. It's kind of like complicated. I would need a blackboard to explain it. Sorry.
Well, that's okay because this is a podcast, so people don't necessarily see. If they're not watching the video, they're not going to see it anyway. But and so the payment channel is opened, and then so there's a payment for every chunk of, let's say, 30 seconds of video. How does that work? How does the money keep flowing?
All right. So as sending an update of the payment channel, which means spending a little bit more money from those locked funds. When I send one of these small micropayments to the provider of the service, he will send me back the video. Right now in Streamium, what we are using is we interrupt the video if the payment flow stops coming, and if the video stops coming, we interrupt the payment flow. So it's a trustless solution for payments.
So basically, could we say it like this? Suppose it's me, the creator of the video, and Esteban is the consumer. I'm the producer, and Esteban is the
Bitcoin is growing much faster, and adoption is much wider in other countries. So I wouldn't say Argentina is the best place for Bitcoin right now. It's actually, I read many things in news articles that are totally not true about Argentina and Bitcoin. So be careful about that.
But at the same time, the development scene in Argentina is quite good. There are many companies and cool projects that are springing from Argentina. So that kind of counterbalances the low usage of Bitcoin in general.
And I think one thing that has been pretty consistent is the Argentinian government's attempts to sort of stop Bitcoin from proliferating in Argentina, regardless of whether or not it's being used. How are those startups coping with that?
Yeah, actually, the Argentinian government is not actively working against Bitcoin. I wouldn't say that. There was the only official communication or action about Bitcoin was a posting by the central bank warning the population about Bitcoin not being minted by the government, like saying, okay, be careful with this because we don't regulate Bitcoin, we don't regulate its emission, so be careful. And that's about it, as far as I know. I'm not a legal expert, but it's actually a more or less friendly environment for Bitcoin companies in Argentina.
So we've been duped by all those CoinDesk articles telling us that Argentina is like...
Yeah, sure. So Streamium is a live streaming application that uses Bitcoin payment channels as a monetization option. So it started off as a hackathon project between 7 friends. It's actually, the team is quite big. It was a group that we used to get together during the weekends we call them Bitcoin dinners. We got together and talked about latest news about Bitcoin, what we saw about the future. And after a while, we got bored about just talking because most of us are developers or work with technology. So we wanted to actually do something. One of the guys suggested doing a hackathon. So we got together on a weekend and started. It was actually Esteban's idea to build Streamium. We were talking a lot about payment channels, and we wanted to build an application that was interesting in the sense that it showed the real value of payment channels as a protocol. So we built it over a couple of weekends, and we launched it several months later because it was a super slow development in our free time. But that's the story.
So what it basically does is it allows a user to record something and stream it live, and in exchange receive payments through Bitcoin micro payment channels. So maybe we could discuss part of the architecture of Streamium. And there are 2 important sections to it. One is how does the money flow, and the second is how does the data flow. And could you explain how both of these things happen when I create my own Streamium stream?
Yes, of course. So Streamium uses WebRTC, which is a decentralized peer-to-peer protocol, so browsers can talk to each other. We are currently relying on a rendezvous server so that browsers can create the connections between each other. And with that WebRTC connection, you can send both data and the video. We're using the capability of sending data so they can negotiate a Bitcoin payment channel. And this is actually, I think it's the first implementation of a payment channel for some kind of like real world usage. Once that payment channel is established, the video streaming starts. And it's a broadcasting mechanism. So if I'm broadcasting my video, everybody that is receiving the video will have to be paying me through a payment channel.
So from a technical standpoint, it's not fully decentralized. We have, I will say the gotchas in a second, but both the video goes through a peer-to-peer protocol and the payments, because payments go through Bitcoin payment channels, which we'll know is a decentralized payment system, and the video goes through WebRTC, which is a peer-to-peer protocol for the browser. And the two points of centralization are what Esteban mentioned: the rendezvous server, where peers can get the other peers' information for discovery, and of course the static HTML server that serves the files for the client to run the application.
Okay, so could you describe the payment channels and how they work in more detail?
So a payment channel is kind of like opening a tap in a bar. You set a certain amount of money that it's the maximum that you want to spend in that payment channel, and you lock those funds in a 2 of 2 address. So this 2 of 2 is controlled by both parties in the payment channel. So any transaction that gets signed will have to have the approval of both parties. And there's a time lock mechanism in case I funded this payment channel, but the other party that is going to be receiving the funds will not be willing to sign a transaction giving back all the funds. So after a day, you can recover all your Bitcoins. Is that clear enough? Or?
Yeah, but so if I understand in this case, what you're doing is you're doing a 2 of 2 multi-signature transaction. The person that's doing the stream Hi, welcome to Epicenter Bitcoin, the show which talks about the technologies, projects, and startups driving decentralization and the global cryptocurrency revolution. My name is Sébastien Couture.
And I'm Meher Roy. Today we are joined by a pair of talented developers from Argentina. They have worked on many projects. Some of them are quite well known in the Bitcoin industry. These projects are Proof of Existence, Streamium, Faradam, and Decentraland. We are going to talk about their projects and the prospects of Bitcoin in Argentina. To introduce our guests, they are Manuel Arauz and Esteban Ordano. We are very happy to have you on the show, Manuel and Esteban.
Hey, Mer. Thanks for having us. We're glad to be here.
Hi. Thanks a lot for having us here.
Okay, so perhaps we could start with Bitcoin in Argentina, because there's this impression in the Bitcoin media that Argentina is the one country which could adopt Bitcoin and jumpstart Bitcoin and leapfrog ahead of all the other nations in this technology. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's actually pretty funny to us to read all those articles claiming Argentina is like the center for Bitcoin and where Bitcoin is growing faster than. It's actually not quite true. As I always tell everyone, Argentina is kind of a good spot in many ways for Bitcoin because our local currency is really, really bad and there are big capital controls and it's hard to get foreign currencies. But actually adoption is pretty slow, and I would say